Welcome everybody to this 2025 CSDMS annual meeting. Special welcome to those of you who have traveled a long way to be here. South Korea, various parts of Europe, Japan, among others, plus different parts of North America. So we're glad you're here. Also, special welcome to the Open Modeling Foundation, folks associated with the Open Modeling Foundation. So they had their members council meeting here yesterday. For those of you who haven't heard of it, the Open Modeling Foundation is an alliance of modeling organizations that coordinates and administers a common community-developed body of standards and best practices among diverse communities of modeling scientists. So I encourage you to check that out. So our meeting theme today, exploring Earth's surface with models, data, and AI. Obviously, the new players on the block in terms of cool new analysis tools are AI and machine learning tools and algorithms. And I think it's worth taking a little bit of a historical perspective. I think you could say, broadly speaking, that the 19th century was a time when, of course, models were entirely mathematical, not computational. Computers were then a job description. But it was a time of rapid discoveries of the mathematics underpinning natural processes. So think thermodynamics and fluid mechanics and electricity and magnetism. And it was a time in many ways when it was looking as if the universe might be beautifully deterministic. When if only we understood it well enough, we could predict its behavior exquisitely well. And to some extent, that dream came true with things like celestial mechanics, right? We can now predict eclipses extraordinarily well, centuries ahead of time. There's going to be an eclipse here in North America in 2099 in something like September. Who knew, right? But in other respects, that bubble got burst when the 20th century came along, and the twin discoveries of quantum mechanics and chaos theory indicated that, hey, there's some systems out there that we might understand pretty well and yet still be unable to predict in detail, but we might still be able to do statistically. On the other hand, the 20th century did give us computational models starting in the 1950s with the first weather calculation. So now, okay, so we're a quarter of the way into the 21st century, and we have these wonderful AI and machine learning tools that are rapidly advancing. And it's interesting to ask whether maybe that will give us a world in which we'll be able to predict some things before we really understand them as humans. And maybe our job then becomes to interrogate the algorithms to try to figure out what are the subtle clues they're picking up on, yeah, that are enabling them to predict. In other words, we can gain understanding from our algorithms. Anyway, it'll be fun to think about those and many other issues of the next 3 days. I want to acknowledge that this meeting and CSDMS in general is supported by the National Science Foundation. Here too, a little bit of historic perspective is in order, I think, because NSF has a big birthday. This month marks 75 years since the creation of the National Science Foundation. And in fact, this year, 2025, is the 80th anniversary of the so-called Endless Frontier Report, 1945, that in many ways set the blueprint for the next 3/4 of a century plus of American science policy. And that blueprint is interesting to look back on. So this was a vision in which the federal government would fund basic fundamental research into all kinds of topics, and in which a lot of that research, not all of it by any means, but a lot of it would be done in universities. And furthermore, the priorities for research would be set not by elected officials or government officials, but it would be set by the scientific communities themselves. So there's a wonderful account of this in a book I highly recommend called The Great American University by Jonathan Cole, in which he demonstrates that that blueprint turned out to be wildly successful, that it essentially transformed the US from relatively a backwater in research into this incredibly vibrant global hub of science and discovery. And did it pay for itself, the investment? Well, there was a recent New York Times article quoting research that shows that every dollar invested in fundamental basic research yields something like a 5-fold return in economic terms alone. So that's the kind of investment that, you know, a sane investor would not want to pass that up, right? So it's an incredible success story, and it's worth celebrating. Now, as we know, that system has taken some hits this year, and we don't know how deep those hits will go or how long they might last. But there's a couple of things that give me hope. One is that it's clear that there's still a lot of people around this country and around the world who really greatly, deeply value the work that you all do. The other thing is that, you know, as I think we in this room know better than most people in the population, scientists are nothing if not creative, resilient, resourceful, and above all, tenacious. And we're going to need all of that, I think, in the months, years, who knows, to come. And one of the things that means is really important, more important than at any time in the past, that we support one another, that we collaborate, that we share resources. So, okay, where does CSDMS come in? Well, some of the resources that we share are digital resources, computational tools, AI, ML, data sets, et cetera. And this is where the CSDMS community, I think, has an important role to play. So a lot of folks here are new to the CSDMS community. So let me say a little bit about what it is. It's really three things. First of all, it's a modeling system, and I'll mention a couple of the parts of that in a moment. It's an unusual modeling system in that it is community built rather than built by one or a handful of wizards in a tower somewhere. And it's designed to be constantly improving and growing and adapting so that we're always able to answer the next set of emerging questions, whatever they may be. So the second thing CSDMS is a community. So it's all of us in this room. It's 2,500 members across the world, all of whom are united by our interest in this beautiful, fascinating place that we call the Earth's surface. And then finally, CSDMS is a facility. It's a computational facility, as I said, supported by NSF. So thank you to NSF. And these folks work hard on behalf of the research that you all do to provide events like this one and various kinds of cyber tools. So speaking of resources, let me just point out a few things. So the model repository continues to grow. We now have 450 plus codes in the repository. This year we had 18 new codes contributed by community members for modeling codes, plus another 8 analysis codes. So thank you all for sharing your hard-won codes with the rest of the community. Another thing that you may be aware of is the LandLab toolkit. So this is a Python language programming library, essentially, that's designed to make it faster and more efficient to develop 2D grid-based numerical models. Here again, we have a bunch of new community contributed components. Some of these already in the latest version, some within a gnat's eyebrow of being, you know, merged into the main source. Thanks to all of you who have updated or added new components. I should point out that LandLab, despite the name, is not just for land. So there's a variety of coastal and marine components in this collection, and projects that have been done using LandLab for different kinds of coastal and marine environment. So coastal and marine communities, please feel encouraged, and everybody should feel encouraged to contribute components and utilities and things to this, because this is really by and for the entire community. So it's also worth celebrating the science that all of you and our friends who were not able to be here today have done over the past year and a bit. In fact, if we sort of look through the list of publications just since like the beginning of 2024, it's way more than we could talk about. We'd take all day to go through them all. I picked up a list of just the ones using LandLab for the past year and a bit, and even that I needed 2 slides to fit everything. Here's slide 1. I'll point out just a couple to pick on people who I think are here in the room with us today. Charlie Shobe and Sam Bauer, looking at the potential erosional consequences of mountaintop removal mining. Yuval Shmulevitz and friends, looking at desert cliffs and soil erosion and its sensitivity to rainfall extremes. Okay, here's page 2 of publications. Amanda Alves and friends, looking at erosion and runoff on forest roads. And Ethan Pierce and colleagues looking at subglacial till deformation and its influence on glacial dynamics. So lots of great science going on. Let me quickly point out that there's a variety of online resources that I encourage you to check out. Among them, I won't list them all, but thanks to those of you who contributed new tutorials to our growing collection and new lab exercises. There's also the community forum that's kind of had new life breathed into it following a workshop back in November. So there's a lot of buzz happening on that forum, a lot of neat ideas around cyber tools and other things. So I encourage you to join that conversation. People often ask me, how can I get involved? And there's a lot of ways. Don't hesitate, don't be shy. I won't read all these ways to get involved. But just know that, again, this whole vision is a modeling system and related analysis tools that are created by all of us together, sharing our tools, creating modules that we can pick up and reuse and take forward as the next set of research questions faces us. I want to say a big thank you to, first of all, to the staff of the integration facility. So these folks work hard behind the scenes to develop some of the glue codes and the enabling tools and libraries that are there for you, and have worked really hard to put on this meeting today. Also, thanks to the meeting program committee, so Laurel, Wolfgang, Kelsey, Xiaopeng, Susanna, and Leslie. Finally, I want to thank the members of the executive and the steering committee. So the executive committee of CSDMS, this is the main leadership team that guides CSDMS. And they are also the chairs of the various working and focus groups. You'll be having a chance to meet many of these folks tomorrow at our breakout session. Thanks to the steering committee led by Paula that provides high-level guidance and advice. Okay, so that gets me to the plan of the next 3 days. So as you saw on your schedule, we're going to be having keynote talks each morning. We're going to have a breakout session in the later morning, and what that actually looks like is going to vary from day to day. We get to hear from projects from students in the ESPN summer course today. After lunch, we have clinics. So thanks to the clinic leaders, and if you've forgotten what clinics you signed up for, you can look at the back of your name badge. I think that lists the rooms too. And then we've got a poster session this afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll have our awards banquet and ceremony here tomorrow afternoon and evening. It'll just be in this building. And then a special treat on Thursday afternoon, a science collider that Matt Rossi is organizing. So thank you, Matt. Okay, I think that's all I have. I will turn it over to Irina to introduce our first speaker.